كم مرة عصف الأنين بداخلي، كم مرة قد ذاق قلبي من أساه. رحلا تمر وكم كرهت مصابها، لكن رأيت الخير يسكب في أنا. كم مرة قد ضقت من عظم البال.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. ما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The Salafis of today are caught between a rock and a hard place, in my opinion. The reason why I've alluded to that is because they always, and correct by the way in this specific point of theirs, is that they always ask us to refer back to the early Salaf, meaning the first three golden generations. And the argument is, which I agree with, is because they had the purest understanding of the deen, because they were closer to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning the companions, and then those companions who taught their students, meaning the successors, and then the successors' students, who are the followers who followed on from the successors. So they have the purest understanding of the deen. Now one might say, Haji, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Like, you're stating the obvious basically, which is correct, but you'll understand why I mentioned that in just a sec. Now the early Da'watul Najdiyah, the early Da'watul Najdiyah were taught by their spiritual father. And I believe the spawns of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, as we see it today, are living in absolute denial. So the early Da'watul Najdiyah, and we're going to get to obviously their names in Takfeeri Tendency Part 4. We're going to show you their books and showing you, look, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab was really the inspirer and the spiritual godfather of this movement. So the purest understanding of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab's teachings, would be understood better by his direct students, and then their students, and their students after that. So in principle, what I mentioned at the start about, the early generation, that we should go back to the golden generation as per the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is the best generation is my generations, and then the one after that and the one after that, then principally this would apply. Now I'm talking about the best generation, I'm talking about the transmission of knowledge, and those who understood it better would be obviously the students of the teacher. And the early Da'watul Najdiyah, which you take as your source of knowledge, as you call them, Immatul Najdiyah, or the spiritual fathers of the Najdi movement, because those who propagated the teachings of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, how did it reach you? Through his students and direct students, and obviously his direct students and then his students after that. So Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab wrote the famous book, as we know, the 10 Nullifiers of Islam. The 10 Nullifiers of Islam. And Nawaqidul Islam, basically, if no one knew what the name of the book was. And what we're going to do today is show you the reality and the context of certain nullifiers, that Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab wrote, or put pen to paper, who this was applied to, or rather, should I say, who was the intended target behind this statement. Because what we find now is that the Najdiyah as of today, which I call the diluted, I was about to say Pepsi version, but I just had a Sprite. The diluted, sugar-coated, watered-down version we see today, in reality, are not following on from the original Da'watul Najdiyah. So it's evolved, definitely, and its extremist elements or roots have been subsequently watered down as the generations have continued. So what we will show you in this video is that the third nullifier, and we'll be talking about the eighth nullifier as well in a separate video, but just to highlight that the intended audience or the intent behind this nullifier was not what they teach you, meaning the Yahuda and Nasara. Yes, you can apply it to them, but the reality on the ground, when Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab put pen to paper, who was he intending? And how did the direct students understand this statement? Because we're going to go by their understanding, I'm sorry to say. I'm not going to rely upon... Now, in essence, the Najdi Da'wah relies heavily upon three individuals. And you can add a fourth. But what I mean by... I call this the Trinity. But I don't mean it in terms of they worshipping them. I mean the Cambridge definition of a group of three people or persons. So, Sheikh bin Baz, rahmatullah alayhi, Sheikh al-Albani, rahmatullah alayhi, Sheikh bin Ibn Uthaymin, rahmatullah alayhi. They heavily rely upon these three. Or the carriers of the Najdi Da'wah, which we see today. Oh, you could add Sheikh Muqbil, rahmatullah alayhi. You could add al-Muallimi. There's others, but I mean the godfathers, if you want to call it that. The one that carried the da'wah. How Najdiyah is pioneered today. What we see Najdiyah or the Najdi da'wah as we see it today is very, very much influenced and directed by these three ulama, rahimahumullah. We cannot divorce the extremists that followed Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab because they carried on his teaching. So Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab taught his direct students, which was his son Abdullah. And then obviously there were others as well. Obviously I can't remember them at the time. Who was the intended target behind this statement? As you can see on screen, we've got the book Ad-Durar Sanniya. And as those who don't know, the one who wrote this book, in fact, was Abdurrahman bin Muhammad bin Qasim. Okay, so he's the one that actually wrote this book. Whoever does not make takfir on the mushrikeen from what? The Turkish state, now the Turkish state here meaning the Ottomans, and the grave worshippers from the people of Mecca, and those who worship the righteous, meaning the Salihin, and those who left Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal for shirk, and exchanged the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, with innovations, what is he? Okay, he is a kafir like them. Okay, so he's a kafir like them. So this is not referring to takfir on the Ottoman Empire directly. It's referring to those who do not make takfir on the Ottomans. So you see, now we're talking about chain takfir now. So okay, the Ottomans are mushrikeen according to them, but those who do not make takfir of them, okay, and those who obviously who worship the graves like the people of Mecca, so they made blanket takfir on the people of Mecca, and we know this meant kufr and apostasy. Why? Because what they did to Mecca in 1210 after the Hijrah, I think it is, or 1211, and that was during the reign of Saud ibn Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad bin Saud. I think 1220, sorry to be honest, that was Saud, not Abdul Aziz. But anyway, so then he mentions that those who exchange the Tawheed of Allah for shirk, and exchange the messenger, also who left the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal for shirk, and exchange the sunnah of the messenger for innovation, and he's a kafir like them. Even if he dislikes their religion, so I mean by that, they probably mean like al-istighatha, or you know, what they are upon, and hates them. So even if they hate them, and dislike them, and loves Islam and its people, but doesn't make takfir of them, meaning the Ottomans, now he's not referring to the Ottoman Empire, he's referring to those, meaning the Arabian tribes, and hates them. So even if he hates them, and loves Islam and his people, it doesn't make a difference. They are still kuffar like them. Okay? So this is the reality of the early da'wah to Najdiyah. Why? إِنَّ الَّذِي لَا يُكَفِّرِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And the one that does not make takfir on the mushriks has not accepted the Quran. Subhanallah. For indeed the Quran has made takfir on the mushriks, commanded that you make takfir upon them, and show animosity towards them, and fight them. Okay, or fighting them, should we say. Come back to me now. It's not referring to takfir on the Ottoman Empire. It's referring to those who do not make takfir on the Ottoman Empire. Number two, that they're kuffar like them. And number three, even if he hates them and hates their religion and loves Islam and his people, you're still a kafir. Okay? So you see, politically motivated takfir. So all of this about, you know, he only made takfir on those who worshipped other than Allah. That was a part of it. But the vast majority was due to political or political alliances or political allegiances. That's what the bulk of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab's da'wah and takfir and his chain takfir and blanket takfir was upon. In my opinion, one of the biggest tragedies for the Muslims in the West that this book, Nullifiers of Islam, was translated in the English language. Again, those who are aspiring students of knowledge, those who are actively seeking knowledge, those who are tulab al-ilm, those who are students of knowledge, yes, when they get to a competent level, then yes, study the book, no problem. But meaning for this book to be translated and actively bought by layman, and then from that people are reading it and thinking and not knowing its context and reality, it's become an absolute catastrophe. This statement was potentially from Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, by the way, but just so put it out there, just say it's not, okay, and it's from the students of the students, meaning the golden chain in terms of the Najdiya standpoint. Where did they base this understanding from? So the passage that you just read or listened to would have made your hairs stand on end. And just to add, it's not just statements, they followed up with massacring and butchering. So these statements were leveled at a certain group of people, and it weren't just theoretical, like, you know, if you don't, you're a kafir, etc. What they did was they followed up with their takfir by going out and pillaging and looting, and that's what they did for 70 plus years. They did istinbat, they pulled or extracted from the third nullifier of Islam, okay, they came to this conclusion or this verdict, okay, which we're talking about the blood of the Muslims, using the third nullifier of Islam, okay. And this is where the blanket and chain takfir came from. So when Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab wrote in his third nullifier of Islam, which we're going to get to, okay, because it's in the same page, okay, and then it's in the next page as well. It was based on the understanding of the third nullifier, and now we're going to get to that. So when we say Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab inspired, okay, and raised takfiris, because he was one himself, a takfiri and a radical, what you see from the extremism of the followers and the followers after was no surprise, or it was no surprise, due to them only implementing what their spiritual forefather taught them to do. So the third nullifier of Islam, what is that? Because you keep hearing me say the third nullifier, but I haven't even got to it. What is it? Because next time you come across the third nullifier, you would know the context and reality. It was applied on the Arabian tribes who did not make takfir on the Ottoman Empire. That's what the third nullifier was targeting. It was targeting that group of people, the Arabian tribes who did not make takfir on the Ottoman Empire, even though they hated probably the al-istighatha, calling upon other than Allah, their Sufi practices. They might have hated it and they might have loved Islam because they didn't make takfir, because they probably, no social media around at that time, so they were probably wrote letters waiting on them to come back to them regarding whether they made takfir or not. Probably they didn't hear from them, and that basically meant that they didn't make takfir of them. You see? So let's go. As you can see where the arrows are, it says Qala al-Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab rahimahullah fi, and as you can see it says 291. The next page, okay, is 292, as you can see, and it says in Nawaqid al-Islam or fi Nawaqid al-Islam al-Thalithu. Okay, so what is it? Nawaqid al-Islam or Nawaqid al-Islam al-Thalithu, and it mentions the statement which is what? Man lam yukaffir al-mushrikeen, that whoever does not make takfir on the mushrikeen. So you see how it was explained before, that whoever does not make takfir on the mushrikeen of what? The Turkish state. So they're using Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab's third nullifier, meaning the students, or if not Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab himself, because it could potentially be Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab himself who said that statement before, but just say if it's not, from the students, it mentions Man lam yukaffir al-mushrikeen, whoever does not make takfir on the mushrikeen, or shakka fi kufrihim, or doubts in their kufr, okay, or doubts what? In their kufr, or sahhaha madhabahum, and is believes that their madhab is correct, kafir, has committed kufr. So the target audience of this particular nullifier was the Arabian tribes. To add further proof and clarity that the third nullifier, more importantly, was utilized very maliciously by Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab and his bandits to expand the territory of Muhammad bin Saud under the guise that they are affiliated and aligned with the mushrikeen, meaning the Ottoman Empire, and those Arabian tribes. Because you have to remember this, before the bandits pillaged Hijaz and various other territories outside of Jazirat al-Arab, is they were hostile to the Arabian tribes who felt that the Ottoman Empire was legitimate according to their understanding. Okay, according to their understanding. Now, even if they were wrong per se, just say they were wrong, does that warrant them to be slaughtered? That's why I ask you ultra Najdis and Super Salafis these questions consistently, because you want to follow on from the teachings or the manhaj of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, but not in totality. Not in totality. You pick and choose. It's a plastic methodology. Anyway, so Abdul Latif, or Abdullah bin Abdul Latif, was asked, Amman lam yukaffir al-dawla, the one that does not make takfir on the Ottoman Empire. Now further it carries on, he goes, they choose their leadership and they do jihad with them and etc., and that the state itself, meaning the Ottoman Empire, are just transgressors. Okay? And the ghanima of those Arabian Bedouins are not permissible. Okay? They're not permissible to take. So how does Abdullah bin Abdul Latif respond? Okay, now he says, فَأَجَابُوا. He responds, and he says, the one that does not recognize the kufr of the dawla. So the one that's what? Does not recognize the kufr of the dawla, meaning the Ottoman Empire. وَلَمْ يُفَرِّقْ. And he doesn't differentiate between them, meaning the sinful oppressors, meaning the bughat or transgressors, and the empire. They don't understand the meaning of La ilaha illallah. Subhanallah al-Azim. And if he believes, فَإِنْ اِعْتَقَدَ مَعَ ذَلِكَ, if he has belief in that, or with that, أَنَّ الْدَوْلَةَ مُسْلِمُونَ, that the dawla, meaning the Ottoman Empire, are Muslims, فَهُوَ أَشَدُّ وَأَعْظَمُ, and it is more severe, basic. This is doubting the kufr of the one that has kufr in Allah Azza wa Jal. Subhanallah. You see? The one that has kufr in Allah Azza wa Jal and does and associates partners with him. Then he mentions, and whoever assists them against the Muslims with any type of support, this is clear ridda. This is blatant ridda, apostasy. Let's just call it out as it is. After all the proofs that we're providing of the takfiri nature of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, of his radicalism and his extremism, and now that you have understood the context of the third nullifier, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab's takfir was out of control. And now you can see the correct understanding according to the students. I don't care whether you present me a contemporary Najdi today and say, no, it means this. No, we go by the direct students who understood the sayings of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab better than your teachers today. Because when you use that principle, as I mentioned before, go back to the golden age because they understood the deen the best. Those who understood the text of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab and his statements were the direct students because they were closer to that time, not a diluted version that you're trying to propagate today. The divergence between the early Da'wat al-Najdiyah, which is extreme, brutal, violent, merciless, and what we see today manifested, and as I said, spearheaded and the pioneers of where the Najdi Da'wah is heading as we see it today by, the contemporary three that, I mentioned earlier, shows you that it's clearly a diluted, watered down, plastic version in comparison to what I presented with proof from their direct students. Leaves no doubt that they were radical Takfiri extremists. The third nullifier was targeting a certain group of people, a certain audience, okay, that they wanted to send their message across to, okay, presenting its context. And now you could, scream, you could pull your hair out. This is from your own works. So when we show you that the third nullifier, okay, of the book Nawaqid al-Islam, written by Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, that third nullifier, we're going to go to the eighth one in another video, leave the contemporary heads, meaning the three that you resort back to, okay, leave their understanding. We go by the direct students. And who did they target? Who did they apply this to? And what resulted, okay, because they followed on this Takfeer, this chain Takfeer, which was not correct. It was politically motivated. It was a tool to consolidate the rule of Muhammad bin Saud and to expand his territory. And then after they passed away, it only laid the foundation for them to use and extract from the nullifiers of Islam, because there was a target audience, there was a target group of people or areas or provinces that was intended by these statements. And what did they do? They expanded further, and this resulted in the 70 plus years of pillaging and extremism and radicalism. And we are seeing the phenomenon to this day. We're seeing it. And I end off by saying, and I hope this bugs you, that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab, may Allah forgive him, and his bandits, his outlaws, okay, his mercenaries, were the forefathers of ISIS, their inspiration, their root, okay? And I know this will make you scream. What I have presented today may shock many of you, but it is my academic right, and I will continue to educate you. I got Takfiri Tendencies Part 4. I've got Who Are the True Followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab Part 3. And you could accuse me of slandering the Sheikh. Say Allah forgive him. I'll got no problem in asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. But this is just emotional tactics, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and you could label me under the sun. I don't care. Unfortunately, the people need to know the truth, the people need to know the reality, and the people are waking up. So take care of yourselves. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
آمنت أن الآخرة لا بد يوما آتية كل الخلائق حاضرة كل السرائر بادية في موقف ما أعظم لم تخف منهم خافية والهول فيهم قد بدا الشمس منهم دانية في موقف ما أعظم لم تخف منهم خافية والهول فيهم قد بدا الشمس منهم دانية